Thank you, everybody, for joining me again today. These weeks are coming so fast, and we're very, very grateful to have two friends of mine. Vince, I've known about for many years, and we've only in the last couple of years kind of become friends. And I've always been, from afar, quite a huge fan of Vince's work, even though I probably have never told him that, but it's true. Both as a keyboard player in coming up in the sort of in the pop music scene of the '90s, and then of course in the work that he's now done in film and TV. So I'm really pleased and honored to have Vince Jones here as a guest. And then James and I met through a mutual relationship, actually sort of connected to MDIIO and what we're doing. And James, and I'm going to brag a little bit for you, James, if that's okay, because James and his team, I think, I may not be getting this totally right, but I feel like you are in the top 5 most, and the top 5 highest earners in SoCan. I think I'm getting that right. And just to put that into perspective, that includes artists like Drake and Bieber and like any other massive Canadian artist. So am I getting that right? Am I close to right on that fact, James?
I'm not privy to the official numbers, but I do know that when we were back last year for the 30th anniversary, they did like a top 30 most performed SoCan songs, and we were 2 of them in the 30, or maybe 3. There was a bunch of them, and we were like, oh, wow, we must be pretty high up there if we're in the top 30. So I would imagine it's something like that. It's got to be close to that, but they don't tell me the official numbers and all that.
So you can see that these 2 are no slouches, and they both come to the composing world from very, very different perspectives creatively. James, if you have kids by any chance, you've definitely heard James's work for sure. And if you watch shows like, is it like officially Black AF, or F is for Family, or Grownish, or Parks and Rec, or I think you did the first Transparent pilot too. You've definitely heard Vince's work. So they both come at it from a very different perspective. Vince is a very unique, quirky sensibility. James has that earworm mentality that is like, drives you insane when you have a 3-year-old that wants to watch the same thing for the 8 millionth time. But anyway, thank you, gentlemen, for joining us. Vince, feel free to kind of expand on your introduction. Brag a bit.
From where? From the beginning?
You were born in none. Yes. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Well, we don't need to go that far back, I guess. Well, I was born in England, but I have a Canadian passport. I have a British and a Canadian passport, and I live in Los Angeles. So what did I do? Well, literally, I started playing a melodica when I was a little kid. I went to a Catholic school, and when we moved, Sister Mary Teresa told my parents, you should get this guy a piano. So then I did Royal Conservatory piano, until I kind of got into high school, which is when I sort of was more interested in kind of getting high, to be honest with you. Can I say that here? I kind of got into popular music, and I became obsessed with David Bowie. Anyways, I answered an ad in a paper right in my first year of college that was for this Canadian band, the Grape Seraph, looking for a keyboard player. So I quit college. I joined that band. That was in 1986 or 87, 1987, I think. And that was it. I joined that band. We made a few records. We made one in Woodstock. We made one at Abbey Road with John Leckie. And then I did that for quite a lot of years. We had, at that time in the late 80s, early 90s, we had some #1 singles and stuff. Were pretty popular. And then when I was 25, by the time I was 25, I decided to quit. I wanted to be a producer. So I started producing. I kind of got into technology pretty early, which the keyboard players seem to do. I bought I think one of the first Sound Designer 2 rigs in Vancouver, partnered with Network. We had a studio. I remember we bought a Mac LC2, a Sound Designer 2 in the IOs. It was like $23,000 at the time. That was about 1990, maybe 89, something. Yeah. And then stayed in Vancouver, did that for a long time, produced, played on sessions. And then an old friend, Sarah McLaughlin, was looking for a keyboard player, MD person to help her put some shows together for Lilith Fair. They asked me to do that, so I did that. When that was finished, decided to move to Los Angeles. Again, still not really thinking about composing, just kind of wanting to produce and mix and play. Came to Los Angeles. I had my own Pro Tools system and all that, and sort of ended up working with, a variety of different producers on different records. And, it was just kind of being open to opportunities. And then all of a sudden, through a good friend of mine, Victor Andrizzo, who's an incredible session drummer and musician, he introduced me to Gabby Marino. And there was a brief going around to write a theme for a TV show. And that TV show was Parks and Recreation. And what I've learned, what happens down here a lot is if they get stuck, I mean, they'll send a brief out, they literally had over a couple of hundred submissions is what I came to find out. And just, as luck would have it, Gabby and I spent a few hours together one afternoon and we wrote the theme to Parks and Recreation. And that was kind of the start. I got this phone call. I was at the airport from Greg Daniels. It was like, hey, congratulations. You got we're going to use your theme. And I was so new to it all. I was like, yeah, great. Okay. Now, of course, I realize like how incredibly, I mean, I knew I was lucky, but now I realize like what a long shot and how incredibly lucky I was, to have that.
It's always like when preparation meets opportunity, right?
Exactly. That was it. So it was just being open to the opportunities. And then again, I got to give my friends, Victor and Martine, who I played with them. I'd done a lot of touring. I was in Dave Gahan's band. I was in Alanis Morissette's band. I played with Morrissey. I played with all these people, which was fantastic. And I have to give them a lot of credit because they really taught me to always say yes. Don't overthink it. If somebody's asked you to do something, there's probably a reason for it. Just do it. And anyway, so that was it.
Well, no, I was going to say, and then behind us, despite the fact that he uses KRKs and is not a fan, obviously, of Star Wars, we have James. So James, give us a bit of your. And he's trying to show off his cool keyboards behind his head. We get it. Yeah, we got you. But give us a bit of your journey.
I'm trying to move. There's a third one down here, the Juno. You can't even see. It's like, why did I even set this up if I can't even see it on the webcam? I had a funny conversation with my wife last night because I was like, hey, listen, should I have the background of the synthesizers or should I have the background of the SOCAN awards on the wall? She was like, have the synthesizers and all that. So this is the problems the first world problems I'm having right now. What's the best background?
But I mean, I'm assuming you started in rock bands, or you kind of came up through being in bands, kind of like all of us did, right?
Yeah, I played in a lot of bands when I was living back in Toronto and toured and did all that kind of stuff. But Vince, I just wanted to just fanboy just for a second because all those bands that you played in were, a big influence on me growing up in Canada and all that. And you sort of lived my dream, And also, I wanted to tell you too, my writing partner Graham Corney's. I was mentioning I was going to be on this with you, and he was like, "Grapes of Wrath, they were my first favorite band ever." So it's like, I just wanted you to know that you're an influence on us. So yeah, that's really cool, man.
Thank you. It was like another lifetime ago. I appreciate it.
Vince is still trying to convince people he's 29. So let's just
that's right. Down. Exactly. It dates me.
You know what? James, if we all just shaved our gray beards, we could lose like 20 years each, right? Have the Captain Picard here, and we're good to go. So, so my background is a little different in that. We were talking a minute ago about luck and good fortune, and I've just honestly, I am aware that I have some talent, but a lot of this has just been luck and good fortune. And what do I mean by that? I was born in London, Ontario. The Fanshawe program, the music industry arts program at Fanshawe College, is in my hometown. So I knew fairly young what the career path was that I wanted. I knew that I wanted to score films. I was a big fan. Growing up, in the 90s, I listened to all the cool music, all the cool stuff, but I was also really big into John Williams, Danny Elfman, all the James Horner, all those guys. And I would study and listen to those composers. And I was also performing on an organ, electronic organ called the Yamaha Electone. And that's actually where I went. I went to Yamaha Music School and came up through their program. And I was actually, by the time I was 17, I was the Canadian national champion for the Electone. And the piece that I played that year was Star Trek II: The Wrath of Khan. So you can sort of see the two sort of interests coming together. Then I went to Fanshawe College and actually decided to take the recording engineering track because I knew that was sort of the technical side was my weaker avenue, and I wanted to strengthen that. And as good fortune would have it, two of my business partners were in my class with me in 1997. And we decided, against all of our instructors' advice, to move to Toronto and open a music house. And so in 2000, we opened Voodoo Highway Music in Toronto. And we started by just doing, there was a lot of, my business partner, Brian, worked at a studio called Manta at the time, and he left Manta to start this company. But he had met some really cool contacts, some composers who did a lot of ad work and stuff like that. And they were just super kind to us and just threw us a bone like, hey, try out this Samsung ad. And so we were very fortunate, again, just with people helping us. We landed a few ads, started to build up our reel. And then it was about 2004 or so, we landed our first TV series, which was called Rich Bride, Poor Bride. And it was a reality TV show about weddings. And that led us into, we were not planning on going into animation, doing animation at all. But that led into a pitch on a show called Total Drama Island, which is an animated show that's sort of made to look like Survivor, like a reality TV show, which is part of the reason they called us and maybe part of the reason we were geared towards that pitch. And again, as luck would have it, we landed that show. And it actually, at the time, was a big reason why Cartoon Network bounced back in popularity. So it was a very big hit. We just happened to be on board. And once that became a hit, that really just opened the doors for us to pitch on numerous other shows. And again, as luck would have it, over the years, we landed two of the biggest cartoons airing right now, Daniel Tiger's Neighborhood, which is the spinoff of Mr. Rogers, and then Paw Patrol, which, by the way, I didn't think was going to be a hit at all. I remember it was the second show we had done about dogs driving cars, and the first was called Turbo Dogs, and which aired on CBC. And so when we were doing season one, I was kind of like phoning it in a little bit. I don't know. Like I was like, this isn't going anywhere. And man, I love being wrong. Like I was so wrong about that. And it was also a good lesson for me just to never phone anything in, because you just like seriously, you just never know what's going to be a hit and all that. Mm-hmm. And so that's sort of where we are today. We are in year 20 now. And my two business partners, Graham Cornies and Brian Pickett, they work in Toronto. We have a fully functional studio with employees, and they do all the audio post and everything on Daniel Tiger and all that there. So, and then I live in Seattle. I moved here 14 years ago, and yeah, and I just work from the home, and that's sort of where we're at now.
It's again going back to where preparation meets opportunity, which is incredible. I want to dig into like the process, because look, I've done a little bit of composing. I'm certainly not even close to that level. I'm obviously I do a lot of film and TV and a lot of original music for film, original songs for film and TV. But the experience of creating music, maybe we'll start with you, Vince. The experience of creating music, go through that creative process of, okay, I'm now starting a show, or I'm starting a pilot, or I'm going to try and pitch to something. How do you organize the process in your mind as you start getting creative?
Panic.
As we all do.
I try not to overthink it. Like, I've learned just through my experience that like I can conceptually, make plans or have grand ideas, and it just kind of never really goes that way in my experience. Like, for instance, working with Kenya. Barris, for instance, on the 2 shows I've done with him. The music that got me those shows were actually pieces of music that I didn't even write to picture. It was just music.
Let's qualify Kenya for a moment. So Kenya is the creator of Blackish, and then Grownish, and then Black AF, and all of these.
And Mixedish and Black AF and all this stuff. Yeah, very, very talented guy, great writer, and literally that was like when I got Grownish. It was, and this is what I find happens to me a lot down here. It's like a last minute call. You know, they're calling people. It's like, can you send us some music that kind of fits this thing? You're like, sure. When would you like it? Now. So I literally, that's my experience. So I literally sent that music, like when I got Grownish, I sent them some music, was just music that I'd written, you know, just different vibes, just, you know, when I had some free time. And I sent the music over to like a music editor at like 5 o'clock, and 7 o'clock that night, they called me and said, Kenya loves it. And he wants to meet you and do the show, you know, which is, again, I don't know if it always goes that way, but that seems to be how it's been going for me. And then, you know, that kind of sets the tone, you know, for the shows that I do, you know, it's like, it just seems to be, you know, the show has to have a vibe. I mean, a sound, right? You know, people want it. It's very important to them that, you know, when you hear this particular music, that's the sound of the show. That's what they always talk about. I mean, I just try not to overthink it. I just experiment, you know, I try and get a different sound palette. I try not to rely on stock libraries. I always try and play some real stuff, and it's just experiment and just throw everything at them and see what sticks, and just hopefully they'll stick with you and have faith in you that you'll do the job before they just decide, you know what, we're going to fire you and get somebody else.
Well, quick funny story. When we moved to LA almost 13 years ago, Kenya was our neighbor.
Oh, yeah?
Actually.
Oh, wow.
And when I mean neighbor, I mean literally our neighbor. In Valley Village. Yeah, we lived on a street called Tiara Street, and he was literally next to us. He became one of our first friends in LA, and we've kept in touch. It's actually, I'm really happy to see his success, and now to see you a part of it is amazing. You know, and let me transition over to James for a moment. How then in that process for you is what is the creative dynamic like between the director and then with you guys? So you submit music, and are they like, could be a little bit more of this, or are they just automatically like, oh my God, this is amazing?
Well, one thing that I've gotten pretty good at over the years, and it's an important skill to have, is to speak the language of directors, because often they speak in a different language musically when they're talking about music. And, you know, it's not their fault. They have so many other things that are up in the air that they're worried about, that they just don't have the vocabulary to explain. Like, they'll say, you know, you've heard the stereotypes, like, make this sound more pink or whatever it is. And so basically cracking that code has been a big help. And one of the ways that we've done that with Daniel Tiger, for example, is we were having some difficulty in season 1, sort of nailing down the sound that they were looking for and nailing down this types of songs. And so we made it easy for them, and we just came up with this one sheet where they had to give us an example of a song that they liked, that they wanted it to sort of sound like, some lyric ideas, maybe a little blurb about what's going to happen on the screen. And I got to say, from that moment on, it was like the easiest show that we've ever worked on. It changed overnight. And so that's been my experience working sort of with the directors and the creatives. One other thing that sort of tends to happen a lot, and it's just something that you just learn to navigate, is when there are multiple voices all weighing in on the same scene. So one person might get you to go one direction, and then you're at the final mix, and the other person is like, you know what, this doesn't work. We want to go surf music here. And so being able to sort of switch things on the fly, and just sort of like, that's just part of the game, is sort of undoing a lot of work that you've already done and just sort of redoing it as quickly as possible. That's the other thing, right? Is like, a lot of these things are due literally the next day. And so that's part of the skill set, I think, is being able to take these notes, not get mad, you know, like, it's nothing personal, right? You want to serve their vision and do it as best as you can. We try never to say no. And then, just being able to sort of turn it around as best as you can and serve their vision by the next day. So,
and you know, it's interesting because you talk about kind of deciphering the language of non-musically creative people and then applying that towards what you do, which I totally am with you. I mean, there was something that I was working on recently. I mean, I did this, and we got very close to the end title for the Aquaman movie. And what was really funny is I remember when the brief came in, we were so close. And when the brief came in, it was like, okay, it needs to sound like, it needs to be a love song, but not a romantic love song. And it needs to, you know, don't forget this, the movie is watery, so it kind of has to sound watery and dark, but it has to sound very big and hopeful, but quite small at the same time. We're like, okay. And, you know, and we got pretty close, you know, we got pretty close to it. And it was just, you know, it just didn't work for us. So I'm definitely, I sympathize with that process. And now, you know, one of the things that you kind of talked about, and I think, Vince, I'd like to get your opinion on it, is that concept of ego, right? It's like, how do you know that they're wrong, but still accommodate their creative instincts, even though, by the way, oftentimes they come back to the first version, right?
Oh yeah.
But
Yeah. I mean, well, it's very important to not have any ego attached to it. You know, you learn that if you're going to work in this industry, you learn that very quickly, not to be, you know, too precious about your music. I mean, you know, I'm there to serve their project. You know, it's not about my music. It's about their picture, really. You know, so, I mean, like I'm doing a documentary series right now for Netflix. And like you were saying earlier, I'd get it where I'd submit the score. And, you know, some of these pieces are like, you know, a couple of minutes and they can be very orchestrated. And like, it's a lot of work. You know, it's like a full day's work to do this stuff. And, you know, we love it. And then you're 8 revisions in. You know,
right.
You know, 2 of which can be rewrites, and
Right.
you just can't. Honestly, at this point, it doesn't matter to me. You know, I mean, I'll do what they want. If I feel strongly about something, I might gently put it out there. Usually, it's more like if stuff's just way too on the nose, you know, because I don't have all the answers. You know, like they could be right. I don't know.
And when you see the final version of it, are you like, I was right? Or are you like, they were right?
You know what? I never actually watched the final version.
That's funny.
Really, I mean, I just, you know, it's like if it happens to be on and I'm watching, I just usually don't. If I go to a mix, I might see it, but it's just not important to me. What's important to me is that the producers and the directors and the editors is that they're all happy, you know, that I've done a good job and that, you know, we have a relatively good time doing it and everybody is creatively fulfilled and satisfied, you know. Well, after that, I want to go play with my kids.
Creatively fulfilled and satisfied is a very interesting way to put it, because that probably has changed for you over the years, I would assume. Yeah. Same with you, right?
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, I was just gonna say too. I mean, this is all. I've had very similar type of experiences, and also I'm so sick of Paw Patrol that I'm not actively trying to go out and watch it. And my kid, I have a 5-year-old, and he was really into Paw Patrol, and then he put it together that I do the music like in the other room from him, and suddenly it wasn't cool anymore. Like he's into Puppy Dog Pals or whatever. So, but yeah, I think, you know, one thing that I found in the last couple of years, and it's sort of just blown my mind, like, is when I'm working on a piece and I feel like this is the best thing I've ever done in my entire life. Like, this is it. Like, this is amazing. They're going to love it. And they hate it. And they're like, yeah, this isn't working. And I'm like, what? And then the thing I'm working on where I'm like, this seriously, they're not going to approve this at all. This is horrible. I can't even listen to this. And they will say, like, this is the most amazing thing you've ever done. And so I've learned to just not really, I mean, you have to listen to your inner voice. You have to listen to your inner critic. But, I mean, it's sort of hit or miss. You just never know, right? So that's sort of been shocking to me. And that's also been a good way to sort of adjust my expectations and all that kind of stuff. It still does hurt every once in a while when something's cut. But that's good. That means I have some pride in my work. But I mean, as Vince was saying, like, you just get used to killing your babies quite often. That's just how it goes. It makes the victories all that much sweeter, right? Like when something you love actually gets approved and goes to air, it's like, I won that one. That's amazing. So
well, it's so funny because I mean that's a big part of it. Is it's just it's like it's yes, perceptibly from the outside, you're a very successful person, but ultimately it's still about that win, right? It's still about that validation for the work that you've done. The bank account's nice, but it's that validation for the work that you've done, which I think doesn't really leave us at any point. They like me.
yeah,
What was that famous
I was gonna
famous Sally Field speech? They like you, like me, you really like me. Wasn't that her? Wasn't that Sally Field that did that? I mean,
Yeah.
we still feel that way, right?
Yeah, totally. I
talk-
feel like the personal pride that I have in some of the work that we do, like especially Daniel Tiger, is it just feels good. You know, I've talked about this before, just how, you know, blessed we are, just how lucky we are to have this gift of a show where our music, you know, Paw Patrol is fun and all these other shows are fun, but Daniel Tiger like helps kids and helps families. And to me, that is what we all got into this for, right? Is to like make a difference with our music. And so I am fulfilled for the rest of my life. Like I will always feel like what I'm doing is important and helping people. And so that to me, like that's sort of what it's all about to me. And the money is great and getting paid is amazing. Like, but ultimately you could get paid and be unhappy, you know? And so I do think it's important to find projects that are personally fulfilling as well. You know, I think that's half of the happiness.
Global syndication doesn't hurt either, though.
No, it certainly doesn't. Don't get me wrong. Like it's awesome, but it's nice to work on something where people appreciate it. And
you kind of talked about something. You kind of briefly touched on something that I want to kind of pick out. The question I have for you guys is I even hate that I'm re-saying this, but killing your babies. But can you repurpose work that maybe doesn't kind of make it into a show, or do you just kind of like, that doesn't work? Or are you like, you know what? I can maybe reuse that or tweak that or modify that for this next iteration. You know, do you know what I mean? Like, or the stuff just literally, it's just like never to be seen from again.
You know, if I get briefs to write themes or stuff like that, where it's like fully fleshed out bits of music, or, you know, like if I've just been sitting around like writing different, you know, sort of vibes, then maybe I'll throw them in, you know, maybe I'll throw them in for a real submission if it's appropriate. But other than that, generally not.
Yeah, it's kind of the same here. My hands are tied often because the music I'm writing is, you know, for this particular show. And it doesn't feel right to reuse things that we've pitched or that we've sent forward to the producers. It depends on the project as well. So if I'm doing an independent film and it doesn't get used, that could probably get reused for something else. Ad work that doesn't get used definitely can get reused for something else. It all just depends on the situation. But I will say, over the 20 years, we have a pretty big catalog of unused work that we just sort of keep around for emergencies, or if someone wants to license something or something like that. So I would always suggest keeping everything you do and trying to relicense it or reuse it if you can. You know, it never hurts.
No.
Oh, there was one thing actually recently where, just as a quick example, I had to do like a disco thing, just a little short little disco cue for a show, and it was due the next day. And I just kind of cut to the chase, and I borrowed some tambourine and some drums and some stuff from a totally other piece of music I was doing, and just flew it in and saved myself an hour of recording percussion. So I think you can reuse elements and like reuse things and like save time. As I was saying before, a lot of this is due the next day. So like I don't have the luxury of recording all kinds of things and taking my time. Like it's got to be quick, you know? So
one of the things that I just wanted to talk about really quick is that we're actually putting together, we're some people on this call know about it. We're putting together I hesitate to use the word library, but we're putting together a repository of music. Maybe it'd be a great idea for you guys, for stuff that you've not you know, put out into the universe, and stuff that's not been used, but you have these really great instrumental little pieces. You got to pop them up and see if we can license those for you. Make you guys a little extra money. I wanted to go backwards here for a moment. So if you were to approach young James and young Vincent, who have ambitions of how do they get their first job? right? Talk me through that process if you were mentoring somebody today. Like, I know a big thing is apprenticeships. I know that that's very, very popular in sort of like the music composer universe, probably more so than in pop music. But where is that open door today, and how do you then exploit that?
I had a pretty unique path here, so my advice might be different than a lot of folks. Like, for example, I am where I am because I have two really solid writing partners. The three of us together are stronger than us individually. And so I always highly recommend, if you can find allies, if you can find people to work with, again, we've been very fortunate that I've known these guys since I was in high school, and we speak the same language now musically. Like, we're just so lucky. It's like being in a band. Sometimes it works out, sometimes it doesn't. But I would say, that was a big, huge, huge help for all of our careers, right? So that's one thing. And then, I'm not sure how much things have changed since I was in my 20s, but apprenticeship, if you're solo, I think is a very good idea. I think there's a lot to gain from that. So that certainly doesn't hurt. And we did that in a way when some of those composers in Toronto were taking us under their wing and sort of giving us the opportunity to do some stuff. So it certainly doesn't hurt to find some mentors and some people that can help give you a little experience. So yeah, that's just sort of my experience there with starting out.
And what is Vince, I don't know if you wanted to expand on that. What are some ways that you do that? How do you meet those people? You're so and so stuck in wherever, and you want to, how would you go about reaching out to maybe like new filmmakers, right? Like, I would think that people that maybe can't afford Vince Jones today, but maybe when you just want to cut your teeth, right? How do you find those filmmakers and sort of attach yourself to them? Because when I look at people like, The Godfather, John Williams, or something like that, right? Like, these are people that he links to Spielberg, and then they kind of have this massive career together, right? How do you go about? I mean, would you reach out to, let's say, film schools and say, hey, I'm putting my hand up? Like, what are some tips that maybe you would use?
Well, I totally agree with the whole mentor thing. If you can find one. I mean, back in the day, I remember making records, and we got to make a record with John Leckie, and he quietly became, a mentor to me. And, having mentors is great. I never really had a mentor as far as scoring goes. I just sort of figured it out. I mean, I've done a lot of sort of, online education and learning and teaching myself and studying and writing and failing and being fired and all of that. I'm just trying to think of the interns I've had. So my first intern, he was a Berkeley student, and through I think it's called the experiential learning program at Berkeley, they post online, and my manager at the time went to Berkeley, found a couple of people, and this guy, Jay Markovitz, who has turned out to be just fantastic young man and super talented and a great recording engineer and mixer, and he wanted to pursue that more. He came out and he worked with my friend Martijn Lenoble and I. We were doing a show called Up All Night that lasted a season and a half on NBC, and at that time I had a recording studio in Hollywood, like a full studio. So Jay came down and he was our assistant, and he wasn't he was a composer assistant, but he was more helping with the engineering. I was always playing live stuff. I was playing live drums and weird guitar and bass. And so that was his foot into the industry. And then from there, we introduced him to the people we knew. And because he worked hard and his personality was good, it just continued and continued. And he ended up at Igloo Music, and he was there for years and blah, blah, blah. And then I ended up with another assistant, actually, my most recent assistant, who's actually moving here from New York City tomorrow. His name's Silvio, another fantastic guy. He's just got a master's degree from NYU in composition, and he cold called me. He started looking at agencies and looking up, going to agencies with composers that he liked, and I don't think he saw my name on there and said, oh, I like him. I think he saw somebody else in there that he liked. And then, I was a few down, and he ended up calling me because they didn't respond to his call. I'm kidding.
I'm sure that that's not.
He put his neck out on the line and he cold called me, and I'm like, what the hell? I met with him and we worked together for a few weeks on a show, and now he's going to come out here and work with me. So
I love that, and I think that that's actually a very I think that what happens is a lot of people, when they think about the concept of cold calling or DMing somebody or kind of just like making that initial kind of reach out, I think they automatically play out the scenario in their minds and go, well, I'm going to reach out to James, I'm going to reach out to Vince, but they're not going to listen to my stuff. Oh, never mind, I'm just not going to do it.
being able to pass along some knowledge, like I remember what it was like when I was young, like it's one of the most gratifying things, to me, and so to be able to open the door and assist these people with a leg up, especially when you recognize talent in somebody, it's like raising kids, it's really a fulfilling thing,
There's also the aspect of when even as we're talking here and I'm thinking back to like when we started, like all those composers in Toronto who just, they didn't have to give us any gigs or any work or give us a shot, and they did. And so I feel like it's sort of like, it sounds cheesy and all that, but it's sort of like my responsibility to give back what they gave to me. And so it's it's always a pleasure to sort of pay it forward and do that. It's just sort of happens automatically because people were nice to me when I started out. So
I think you would be surprised because obviously I get DM'd all the time too, and I've been obviously very vocal about giving people my email address, jgray@mdio.com. Anytime, hit me up. But the idea of just putting yourself out there, right? Kind of like putting yourself out way and see what happens. And I think too sometimes people make the mistake of trying to monetize too quickly. So it's like let's balance out here. Like when I look back at early parts of my career and thinking, God, I made no money, but man, I learned so much on those projects. It's sort of really like understanding and understanding how to earn that knowledge that it takes to accumulate over years and years and years. We're going to start actually jumping over into some questions because I know that we do have some questions happening. I just wanted to kind of thank you guys again for doing this, and I'm going to remind everybody next week when you get the email, invite a friend, please. This is really good stuff, and we're so generous to have people like Vince and James sharing their knowledge with us for free, just because they're good dudes. And at some point, I'm going to owe a lot of people a lot of sushi.
If I can ever get down to LA again, I may not be down there till 2022 at this point, So
more work for Vince.
Yeah, they got to film something before I can write some music.
I feel like those are going to be some of our questions coming up, actually. Zan, hit us.
All right, the first one's from Reiner. Specifically for James in the first part, I'd like to know more about the one sheet process you use to streamline your workflow, and then how does your workflow evolve over time with the producer?
So the process of the one sheet, as I was saying earlier, we were sort of forced into that because we were just having real communication problems. And we just sort of thought about like, well, what are the 5 or 6 bits of information that we need in order to nail this as close as we can? A lot of directors, and this is something maybe we should have talked about earlier a little bit when we were talking about directors and the relationship. Early on in a series, season 1, like the pilot especially, and then much of season 1, it's a lot of sort of playing in the sandbox, which is great. That's what they should be doing, and they should be developing the sound and look of their show, trying things out, experimenting. But as I'm sure you can imagine, that can be a little frustrating when you're on revision 9 of a song. And at the time we had 8 or 9 different songs all up in the air. And so this was just the result of us figuring out what key data points do we need to actually get this as close as possible. And then the other cool thing about it was that the producers really took to it. I think they liked being heard, and they liked us getting it really close, and they liked being part of the process as well, and us asking them questions. So it was some nice audience participation there. So that's sort of the nature of that, how that one sheet developed. I've said before too, Daniel Tiger was a challenge in season 1. And after that one sheet, it is now my favorite show to work on. Like, it's just an absolute joy. And I think it also comes back to, there's a fear as a composer that you just want to say yes all the time and sort of keep your head down and don't push back and don't rock the boat because you're afraid you're going to get fired or whatever. And I think there's definitely time, you definitely want to say yes, and you definitely want to roll with everything. But there's just some times when it's okay to sort of push back a little bit in a kind way, a productive way. And it made all the difference in our lives. Like, it was just amazing. It's one of my favorite stories, that little bit. With these shows, the cool thing is a lot of these shows were like on season 5, season 6, season 7. When you get to that point, you've worked with these people for that long. It's just absolute pleasure. In fact, the notes, then there's less revision notes. You sort of learn to know what they like, and that's really when it's really fun to work on these shows. And sometimes the producers change or the directors change mid-season or whatever, and that can sometimes be interesting because you're sort of learning their new language. But overall, it gets easier and tighter and fun, and you become part of a team. That's been my experience.
Yeah. So short of doing a film, independent film or feature documentary, then, I'll meet the director, obviously. But generally with TV, unless I'm doing a pilot, if I'm doing a pilot, we'll generally have a meeting with the director, but usually I'll never meet a director, because it's the writers, it's the showrunner, and it's the producers and the editors who I'm dealing with.
All with opinions.
Oh yeah, always with opinions. And every show's different. I mean, there was a point last year I was doing F is for Family, which is animated, and it goes everywhere from, it's set in the 70s, so there can be like, Bernard Hermione horror stuff to big band stuff. It's like all over the map. And then I was doing Black AF for Kenya, which is another different thing. And then I was doing Grownish at the same time, all with a different group of people. And I don't have a team of people. Like, I have an assistant. It was getting kind of intense. But again, you just kind of get into the sound of the show. And like, for those shows, well, the animation is what it is. I mean, that kind of is all over the map, but I have my palette set up and my template set up so I can be reminded of it. I can go back and revisit the music. I find that with these TV shows like Black AF, the sound of that show just became this sort of 6/8 lilting feel of this sort of plucked string with a couple of weird elements around it. And then that's that show. And, like F is for Family, when we do our spotting, I do it remotely. I do it over the PIC system. So that way I'm just I'm watching picture with my partner, Dave Kushner. We're all remotely, we're never together. And Mike Price, who was the Simpsons, writer, he's the showrunner. So that's how we do that one. Black AF, I was running down to Hollywood to do a spotting session, but I literally did that show, the 8 episodes, in like a couple of months. It was crazy. And then Grownish, we do it in person. We go over to ABC. So they're all kind of different. But I think with this pandemic that's happened, I think we're learning, like, I just did a spotting session actually for this documentary thing on Netflix, and we did it remotely, and it worked great. I don't know if that answers the question.
I should add too
know what the question was.
For Daniel Tiger, we have a weekly phone call, which we don't with any other show. We have a weekly group phone call where they go over the note, they email us all the notes, and then we all discuss it. We ask questions. There's a lot of back and forth on that show because we have multiple songs sort of up in the air at any given time, and I really like that. But then there's been experiences. There was a movie we did called My Babysitter's a Vampire. And the director was a very famous Canadian director who was notorious for sort of wanting to go and mess with the music quite a lot. And the producers actually we never even spoke to him once in the entire project. Yeah. They were just like, yeah, let's just keep him away from the composers and let them do their thing. So you're right. It depends on the project. They're all sort of different.
I do like to have a chat, like, especially when a show's getting going, like when Black AF started, like, I like to be involved. I like to sit with the creative people and hear what they have to say. I would, right? Like, rather than them sending you a picture and say, what do you think? Like, well, this is the time when I could be fired tomorrow, because when I show them what I think, and if it's not what they're thinking, so it is kind of, that causes me a little anxiety at the top. And then plus working here, I don't know what it's like in Canada because I've never worked there, but down here in Hollywood, like they always say, you haven't really worked in the business until you've been fired half a dozen times, and it happens extremely rapidly and pretty violently. They'll be telling you they love your music on Friday afternoon, and Monday morning, your agent will be calling you, telling you they've gone in another direction.
Well, it's funny. I think it was, I may be attributing it to the wrong person, but Dustin Hoffman, I think, was the one that said every time he finishes a film, he feels like he'll never work again. Zan, I think there's a couple more questions here.
There are. This one's from Sean. How much time do you usually have to do an episode?
I have 1 week generally.
Yeah, it all depends. Yeah, typically it's a week. Like if we're scoring, we're working on like a Paw Patrol special right now where we're actually scoring like big, gigantic chunks of it, right? And that's usually due we get about a week. Typically, though, what happens is, so like right now, for example, we've got 5 shows on the go. And so I don't have the luxury of like dedicating 1 week to just one show. And typically what happens is there's a lot of revisions. You got to fix this, you got to fix that. And just the nature, I try to only do sort of, because I don't want to spread myself too thin, I try to do just sort of one show a day. And so I'll budget my time. I'll look ahead at the week and go, okay, today I'm doing Total Drama, tomorrow I'm doing Paw Patrol, then Daniel Tiger, then this, whatever. And it all just sort of naturally bumps up against each other where I'm often at the point where everything's due the next day.
Those shows are wall-to-wall music. I mean, right, aren't they?
Yeah, but there's also another thing worth mentioning too, which is they are wall-to-wall, and that's actually one of the awesome things about working in animation is you just get really good at scoring really fast, all different styles of music. So it's a really great way to sort of hone your skills. But it's more difficult in the early seasons. Once you get to season 2, 3, 4, and onwards, you've developed a very big library of reuse. So we're at the point now with Paw Patrol where we do like maybe 2 or 3 minutes per episode now. And that's awesome. Like that's really great. That's why we're able to do 5 shows, right?
Yeah, that's amazing.
Yeah, it's nice when you get to that point. But yeah, typically things are due the next day, and that's just sort of how we roll quite often. And you know what? I wouldn't have it any other way because it forces me to be creative, to be quick, to think on my toes, to trust my instincts, to just go with it. And I'm still surprising myself often of like, I'll sit down, I'm like, okay, I have to do a whole Star Wars thing for this scene tonight. How am I going to pull this off? Like, I can't pull this off. And every time I'm like, I did it, I pulled it off. Like, so it's a nice feeling, and it builds up your self-confidence. And
we should do a whole conversation on imposter. What do they call it? Imposter syndrome.
Imposter syndrome. Okay, here's a funny little point just to that. We were talking earlier about being fulfilled artistically, and so one of the tricks that I have, because so many of my babies are killed, is I have a couple of different personal side projects that I do, just artistic projects that are very fulfilling, that I never have to kill a baby. And my first album I called Imposter Syndrome. So like I'm totally still there with you on that. I always think I'm going to fail, like every time.
And I know we talked about repurposing music earlier. Zane, you got a question for Vince?
When you guys score, or sorry, this one's from CT. When you guys score for films or a series, do you actually write the scoring out?
Well, I don't, because it would take me longer to write the scoring out than it would to actually write the music. I mean, I just basically, I play it into a computer, and if I'm not using a computer, then I play it on a real instrument.
There's no reason to chart out the music that you're doing. Not
really. And if I had to, the computer could either spit it out, or honestly, I would hire somebody to do it. I used to always play live music, and then I realized that I was getting so many revisions that it was just taking too much time. So I try. It kind of sounds sad, but I try to do as much of it programmed in MIDI so that it can be revised easily.
I love it.
You hear stories about John Williams and Dave Corner having to make changes on the fly, like mid-recording session and stuff.
Oh yeah.
Like the Star Trek, the motion picture theme, and the director was like, "Yeah, that's not working," and he had to do it like on the fly. What did they do? Like, did they just write it? I can't even wrap my head around it. Like,
they wrote a different whole note.
It's amazing how they do it. They're like bar 67 to 69. You did it, and then there's like 60 musicians that are all like, they're like, okay, let's take it again. Boom.
I couldn't imagine. It's crazy.
But the upside is there's probably less recalls because there's no way they're getting 60 pieces back at Abbey Road to fix that up. You know what I mean?
Oh yeah.
Exactly. Yeah.
I know we got a couple more here. Zan.
This one's from Sean. How would you recommend pricing your work?
As much money as possible. As much as you can possibly get it. And if they don't have that much, just take it anyways.
Is there an
Just
advantage to
go.
having representation, actually?
Oh yeah, but and then own the just be mindful of like for writing for TV's a work for hire. So I'm selling the publishing's gone, right? I get my writer's share. But if somebody comes to me and says, I need this, I need a piece of music for this, and I only have a few $100s. Well, it doesn't necessarily mean I'm going to say no, but I'm not going to let them own that piece of music.
But I think you wanted to clarify something where she's saying, would you charge them per minute, per episode? Is it just is it a general amount?
I hate talking about money. I have an agent who talks about money. I mean, seriously, down here, like things have changed so much. Like there's kind of like, I don't know your experience, James. I'm sure it's the same. Like TV and film, they have like a general parameter of money that they spend. But then there's all kinds of, like down here, like people are available and people need music and people need work. And if somebody comes to me and they have a very small budget and I like it, then, I'll do it for them. I don't know if there's a, like I know I have a friend who's a ghostwriter, for instance, and he gets paid by the minute. But other than that, besides the fees for shows, I honestly don't know what the answer to that would be, other than to get as much as you possibly can.
My experience is that now this is the animation mostly. They have a budget for the season and it breaks down per episode.
Yeah. And
now Brian in Toronto is typically the one who is dealing with the clients on this level. So I could be off base here, but if I recall, it's something like $750 to $1,000 per episode for music, something like that. It might be a little more, but it's usually per episode. And then in the video game world, it's pretty clearly spelled out. It's $500 to $1,000 per minute because there's no back end, right? And this is also something really to consider: is where is this going to air? How often is it going to air? Yeah. Because if it's going to air on a major network, often you could cut them a deal on the front end, and I mean it's worth your time to get involved.
Yeah.
Another thing that I like to do as well when we're dealing with new clients is to quote them what we feel we're worth, and then let them know right away, like, listen, we can work within your budget. Like we want to work with you. We want to do this gig. So don't let us scare you off. But this is sort of what we're worth, and that sort of plants the seed in their head of like where you're at professionally, and maybe they're getting a deal. Maybe that's good for them. They'd be happy about that. So, but yeah, it depends on all the different shows.
I mean, Justin, you could probably answer this question with the licensing. I mean, I know from sitting in spotting sessions, there is a budget to license music. Obviously, the composer gets paid his fee, but licensing, I mean, I've seen them talk anywhere from indie unknown artists they're going to pay them $750, $1,500, all the way up to, big name artists who they're going to pay $25,000, $30,000, to use 10 seconds of their song. So
yeah, I mean, I think there's sort of like an unofficial pricing model, but it's not anything that's like specifically out there. But it's like that if you're going to get a national Samsung ad, it's going to be 100, 150,000.
Exactly. Yeah.
That if you're going to get a film trailer, it's probably going to be in the neighborhood of about 70,000. There's sort of like it's kind of out there, and it's funny because you can have a song that can I've had the same song licensed for $300,000 and for $1,500, the same song. Yeah. It's just the nature. It's the nature of how that placement works, right? It's who the client is.
And definitely more money for those big product placements and trailers and stuff like that.
For sure. I want to talk a bit about next week, but I know we have one more question, and then invite your friends to come next week. Please forward that email that you get and say you're really going to love this. I know we got another question, Zan.
This one's from Sean. What is the process and time frame usually to develop that quote unquote fingerprint of sound for a series or film with your collaborators? And how has the pandemic affected your work?
Well, I woke up unemployed 2 months ago. I mean, there's a documentary series that I'm doing that's shot. So I was waiting for them to edit it, and there was a couple of episodes for me to do. But my series had wrapped, and we're waiting for, actually, Grownish was supposed to shoot this month, and it's not. And I don't know when it's going to shoot. Like maybe it'll shoot in November, maybe it'll shoot in January. But until they shoot something, there's nothing for me to write music to except to finishing up this thing. So, what are you going to do? I'd say we're all in the same boat, but we're not really. We're kind of all floating in the same storm, but some people are in yachts and some people are in, cedar strip canoes. I'm probably in a Boston whaler.
I've been very fortunate. And again, I don't know if this is a blessing or a curse. We were talking before the thing started here today about how we've got 5 shows on the go. And the one aspect of the entertainment industry that is not slowed, but they've actually put their foot on the gas is animation.
Yeah.
And so since this pandemic has started, I've been busier than I've been in like 10 years. And the problem there, that's the blessing. The curse is that our nanny, who comes to the house every day, is no longer coming. So I have the childcare duties during the day. My wife works at Microsoft, and so she's sort of in a war room every day, as you could imagine, trying to make sure the cloud's still working and things are still going. So I have the kid as much as I can during the day, and then I'm working every night, and I'm burning the candle at both ends. So I don't mean to complain because this is a super first world problem. I recognize that. But, I've been busier than ever. And again, we're just very fortunate to be sort of where we are right now. So
here's the mistake that you're making. You should teach your nanny how to mix.
Yeah.
And then you'll be fine. And then you teach her to mix. You teach her to mix. You save that problem. She's watching your children. She's mixing your song. She's reviewing notes from your director. You're not thinking about it the right way, James. You're paying her anyway. Anyway, I'm just joking, of course. Hey, guys, thank you so much.
What? She actually gives me feedback, the unsolicited feedback, like way too often. I've told her, like, listen, you got to stop. She's like, that song is like totally not working for me. And I'm like, no, for real. Like, just because I don't need that in my head, I don't need that doubt. So.
That's so funny. Yeah, no, trust me, I have 3 A&R people that live in my house with me.
I've learned to ignore them all. Having kids, that's one of the great things about having kids. You just learn to ignore them.
Yeah.
I'm sure they'll say the same thing, Vince. I wanted to thank you guys again. You guys have been absolutely, inspirational guests and really incredible. Thank you so much. I really want to thank you guys. Please tell a friend. Please forward it and tell a friend. James, Vince, thank you so much. I want to thank Curtis Cerna, my partner at MDIIO, Zen for sitting up in the cloud and putting together all of these cool images and taking all the questions. James Best for being the person behind all of the emails and making sure the train stays on the track. Follow us at We Are MDIIO. My name is Justin Gray, and if you haven't signed up for MDIIO, please do. MDIIO.com. It's free. Thanks again so much, everybody. Stay safe. Tell a friend, and we'll see you next week. Thanks, everybody.